Al-Bayan Institute. We're all new to it too. So Al-Bayan Institute is a new initiative launched by Dr. Muhammad Salir, who had to step away, and Dr. Hilmi Saoud. Oh, is the volume low?
Speak a little.
All right, Dr. Hilmi, and the focus is to offer adult education classes to our community members. And the adult education classes, rather than being just focused on computer applications or writing, they're more practical focused, but with a faith-based perspective. So how do we bring Islam into our lives on a daily basis? So this is kind of like the starter course. This is the 4-week course. It's being offered Monday, Tuesday. So after this class, we've got 2 more classes, inshallah. And then if we all agree, we could have another short session, 1 short class during Ramadan. The focus of this class is to improve our communication skills. How do we tie our communication skills and who we are and how we view ourselves and how we interact with others to our perspectives as Muslims as well? So if you quickly go through the first packet, you'll see that the 4 classes. In the first class, we covered finding your purpose and discovering your essence. We spent a lot of time talking about how we view ourselves, the view of time, how we prioritize, the levels of the nafs, and what we may struggle with on a day-to-day basis. And the homework for last week's class was to do the Myers-Briggs test, which was a personality test. Have you guys ever done the Myers-Briggs test?
Yeah.
You have. Okay. Do you remember your letters by any chance?
I can find out.
You can find out. Okay. Okay. So it's a series of letters that come out. So, Brother Mustafa, did you do the test?
I did, but I cannot recall the letter.
You can't recall the letters. Okay. Okay.
ENTJ.
ENTJ.
EN.
There wasn't TJ.
Was it FP? We did this a long time ago.
I know, you're just making up letters now.
No, I was EN.
Mine was IS something.
There is no F, no, I'm kidding.
Mine was IS something.
It was IS something. Okay, well, I mean, it's generally an indicator of whether you're introverted or extroverted, you're intuitive or intuitive or judging, sensing or feeling, and there's a last element of it as well. It changes. It's not always the same because, of course, the state of mind changes, the place that you are in your life may change, but it's a good indicator to give you some insight into who you really are, even if externally you don't exhibit that. I was mentioning earlier that when pretty much every time I take the test, and even when I used to take it, I get introvert. And everyone's like, you're not an introvert. But like deep down inside, I really am. I really like just to be by myself. So it may not be the external indicator that the world sees, but it's something that should give you a better idea of who you really are. So it's just a fun test to do. When you read up, and once you get your letters, and you read up on it, you can see it'll give you an explanation of who you match best with. We use it in our marriage center, which the launch actually is this Saturday, May 30th, inshallah. If you are available, we're launching Cornerstone, which is a family center right next door to MBIC. So please come out to a picnic if you're available on Saturday, inshallah. That was a shameless plug for another initiative. We'll go back to what we're talking about here. All right, so today's class is going to focus on building relationships through communication. So the way the class progresses is we start with intrapersonal, which is communication within the self, and then we move to interpersonal, communication in a dyadic relationship with one other individual, and then we move to rules of engagement, which will be the next class, where we cover communication on a larger scale. And then we go into building a family, community, and society, which will take us to the next step. And then again, inshallah, if we are able to have the Ramadan session, it'll be more spiritual focus. So you guys all have this booklet, so you are welcome to look through it, and then you can always email me if you have any questions or things that you need kind of an update on. Unfortunately, we did not have a video camera with us last week, so we did not videotape last week's class. This week's class will be videotaped, and inshallah the future classes will be taped as well, so that if you cannot attend, you will be given the videotape, inshallah. Okay, so a little bit about me, for those of you who don't know me. I don't think I've ever met, I think I may have met you before, Brother Asad. I'm not sure if I ever met you, Brother Shah. So my name is Susie. I'm a teacher here at Nur al-Iman. This is actually my classroom. So I teach English and public speaking and career planning and writing workshop in the high school. I also teach full-time at DeVry University, so I'm a professor of communication there. I'm also a speaker, so I travel quite a bit to give lectures in different places. And I run the counseling center called Cornerstone Counseling Center. And if you know my husband, he's the more famous of the two. He owns Douglas Pizza, and I have 3 kids. So alhamdulillah. Alright, so if you don't mind, we're actually going to do another really quick introduction, just since we do have several new members, and I want everyone to kind of get to know each other. So with that said, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do, and why you're here.
My name is Asad, Khwaja Asad. I work in the IT field. I'm a developer. Basically, I work in the city, in the law firm, about 2,000 employees. We had a gathering basically, and it was mentioned about this class, and I was interested in. This sounds really great. Communication is really important. I said, "Wow, this is good. You know, I should definitely try it." I didn't know it was you were teaching it. But I think it's a great class actually having this. Communication is important everywhere, in the houses, outside, carry everywhere. So it's a good skill to learn, and I said definitely we should try for it. Even though I was struggling because usually I'm late coming from city, I just came straight from work, and usually this is early, I usually much later. But I try to, I'm a bit happy you're recording.
Alhamdulillah, yeah. And I do apologize, honestly, I travel almost every weekend to give lectures in different places, so it's hard to hold it on a weekend. So we decided to just launch it with the weekdays and then see moving forward.
I just happened, I wanted to go to ICNA, I saw your name there, you were doing some seminars too.
Yes,
so
yes.
You're quite famous, I see.
Alhamdulillah, like I said, I think Hamdi, the owner of Douglas Pizza, is the more famous half. But
I know Hamdi very well.
There you go. Alhamdulillah. Alright, it's nice to meet you, Brother Asad.
My name is Ghulam Nabi Shah. A lot of people didn't pronounce my name well, so I said call me Shah.
Okay,
Yes,
so Brother
they
Shah.
break the name and change the meaning as well. I'm also IT professional. I'm a CTO in a technology company in Parsippany. I manage all of their offshore, onshore offices. I have done many communication courses. I did an MBA as well. The purpose of coming this class is how to relate with religion, to learn. Because when I was studying this thing, and I had a lot of discussion with my professor regarding how you relate. You know, when you have a trait, you know, they said it's a born to be a leader. But if it's a born to be a leader, then Allah giving the opportunity to everybody as well. So why are you not saying that you don't have opportunity? That means.
Right.
So we had a lot of dialogues and discuss about that as well. So I just want to understand the religion point of view discourse.
Okay.
That's the whole idea.
Thank you for coming to class.
One more time.
One more time. Yes, we have new members, so we need everyone to know who everyone is.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mustafa Al-Shirbini. I work as a risk manager in New York City housing, and the reason I'm here is it's nice. It's a great initiative, and we're all waiting for such initiative around our community, and always communication classes will be helpful, especially from the perspective of Islam.
All right, Brother Mali, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
My name is Muhammad.
Muhammad Ali, that's why he goes by the nickname Mali.
I'm a student here at the class for extra credit.
And he's here because he gets extra credit for my class if he comes. But you only get extra credit if you stay through the whole thing. So.
No, wait.
Yes, that's the deal. Okay.
We have to eat at Douglas.
Go ahead, inshallah. We'll throw in a free pizza or something, okay? Alright, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ibrahim. I'm in his class. I go to school here. She teaches me career planning. It's a great class. Here for the extra credit.
Yes, he is. So I think, oh look, I have another student. Come.
High school student?
Yes. Sorry, you get 10 points off for being late.
Yeah, we got
Okay. Okay, assalamu alaikum. My name is Arifa, and my background is in education, and I have 2 kids, 2 teenagers, which is partly the reason why I'm here, so to improve my communication with my teenagers. And also I did an undergrad in psychology, so a lot of this I did learn, but I learned it as a student, and now I need a refresher course into how to put it into action.
and the spiritual component is important to me as well. So, and I respect Susie, Sister Susie, and want to learn more from her. So that's why.
Thank you. Think of what you're going to say because we're coming to the end.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Amina Aslier. I graduated from Al-Bayan about 5 years ago, and now I'm a second-year dental student at UMDNJ. And this course is really important to me because I think it's critical for our community to be able to have sound communication skills, both for within the house between family members and also within the community itself in general. And so I think it's really important for us to strengthen our skills, and so I wanted to do it through this course.
My name is Hasna Asir. I'm a pharmacy student at Rutgers and I graduated already last year. I think it's really important to take this course because as a college student you're kind of thrust into an environment where your religion and your perspective are put in the spotlight, and it's important to be able to communicate your beliefs and your morals and ethics with other people who don't share the same viewpoints as you.
Alright, thank you, Hasna. And Halima.
My name is Halima Haddad, and I am a sophomore at Al-Bayan, and Susie is my English teacher.
Yes.
And I think that this course is important because I'm at NY, I'm in like this bubble and I know everybody, but once you get out of that, I want to be prepared for that kind of
Okay, good. I'm glad you're here. You just became my new favorite student. Okay. In English class, okay? Okay. So I think everybody hit upon some really good points about improving communication, understanding the view of communication from more of a faith-based perspective. I think one of the difficulties that I've run into, in my field of communication, speaking to members of our community, and in speaking to others as well, is the question that always comes up that, why do I need communication? Communication is just talking. I know how to talk. It's common sense. Why would we need to study it? Why would we need to learn it? What is it that you teach exactly? And I think for a lot of us, we think of communication as something that's just common sense. It's just, it should just come naturally to you. There's no reason why we should study it. There's no strategy behind it. But it's actually quite the opposite. That communication, personally, I feel, is an actual science, and it's no different than if you were to study IT, or if you were to study the finance, or dentistry. Communication is a science as well. Understanding how individuals interact, how they connect with each other, what certain nonverbal cues mean, what verbal cues mean, makes a big difference in how you can actually connect with the community and with the ummah. And I think when we look at it from an Islamic perspective as well, we see that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a master communicator. We know that when he would speak to someone, that person always felt like he or she was the most important person. He always felt that whatever the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was saying, he was saying it to him. And part of the reason why so many people connected with the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his message was because of that human element as well. That we know the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a human being, and he is the example that we aspire to. And so we can also learn from the interactions of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and try to embody some of those communication traits as well. And that's something we're going to kind of talk about today and learn about, inshallah. So, if communication was common sense and it was very easy and basic to understand, we wouldn't have so much miscommunication in the world. And the large reason why we have so much miscommunication is because oftentimes when I say tree, I assume that Halima is going to think of the same thing that I think of. So when I say tree, what comes to your mind, Brother Shah?
Tree.
What kind of a tree?
It can be, any green tree.
Which green tree?
Pine tree.
A pine tree. Okay. What came to your mind when I said tree?
Evergreen tree.
An evergreen tree. What came to your mind?
When you mentioned tree?
Yeah, when I said tree. What image came into your head?
It's usually connected with the ayah in Quran, the tree that's her roots is connected to the ground.
Okay.
And her branches reach into the sky.
Okay, so an ayah from the Quran came to your mind when I said tree. What came to your mind, Khali, when I said tree?
My backyard.
Your backyard, okay. What came to mind, Muhammad?
My front yard.
Your front yard, okay. Ibrahim, what came to your mind?
A dead tree.
A dead tree. You sound so sad. Okay. This is telling me a lot about you.
Very promising.
What came to your mind?
My backyard, a tree that gave us shade yesterday, we were all praising that, by the grace of God, we have such a beautiful tree that gave us shade yesterday.
Okay, so a tree that gave shade.
Yeah.
Okay.
A forest, like multiple trees.
Okay, multiple trees.
Think of like a street with trees.
A street with trees, okay. The tree that I was thinking of was like a palm tree on a desert island that, that I would be sitting under right now with, halal margarita in hand, But see, when I said tree, each of us assumed that, okay, tree, we know what tree is. But every single one of us had a different idea or a different picture in our head of what the tree was. Okay? And this is where miscommunication begins. Okay? When we enter a conversation or we enter a communication situation with the thought process that what I say is going to be understood by the person I'm talking to in the same way that I want it to be understood. Does anyone know Murphy's Law? What is Murphy's Law? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. In communication, Murphy's Law definitely applies. Anything that can be misunderstood will be misunderstood. Okay? And we live in an age today where there is so much communication. Whether you're texting, or you're calling, or you're emailing, or you're Skyping, or you're face-to-face, right? Communication. And throughout all those modes of communication, there can be a lot of miscommunication, right? When you text Muhammad Ibrahim, right, and you tell him that you're coming to pick him up, do you write, I am coming to pick you up, period? What do you text? What do you text him?
I'm coming to pick you up.
I'm coming to, you really type all that out?
Yeah.
Okay. If you were going to pick someone up, would you type, I'm coming to pick you up?
No.
What would you type?
Be verified.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking like, I type BRT, be right there. So with the communication that we have, with the mechanisms that we have today, a lot of times we're shortening our communication. Unless you're old school like Ibrahim, I guess, and you're typing everything out. We're tending to shorten our communication, which is opening the door up to even more possibilities of miscommunication. Because the person who is sending the message is codifying the message, is trying to put some type of code into the words that he or she is sending across. The person who is receiving the message is decodifying it. And something in the process of codifying and decodifying often gets lost. And for those of you who are in the computer science world and know a lot about codes, you know what happens when one thing is off in the code. The whole thing just doesn't work, right? And we see this today. We see it in relationships, we see it in families, we see it among friends, we see it in organizations, we see it within our own communities and our own messages as well. So it's important to understand why miscommunication is happening and to work on how we can fix it. Because at the end of the day, we only have control over our own actions and our own words. We can't control the decodifier. We can only control the codifying. So it goes back to how we present ourselves and what comes out of our mouth as we're communicating with whoever we're communicating with. So this is the basic model of communication. You've got the sender, you've got the message, you've got the channel, and the receiver. So, Assalamu alaikum. How are you? So we talked about polychronic and monochronic last week, and the view of time. And we said that a lot of people in our community are polychronic, right? They tend to take their time getting to things. So I'm going to give you the packets for today. There you go. This is from last week, and these are today's packets. All right, so this is Brother Tariq, Sister Saham, and
This
Ilham.
Ilham, she is my sister and she's visiting from Saudi Arabia.
Oh, and you brought her to class. Oh, that's so nice, alhamdulillah. Welcome to class.
Thank you very much.
So, Brother Tariq and Sister Sam, just because this is a communication class and you all have to talk every time you come, and also the new sister, if you can just briefly introduce yourselves to some of the new members who are here, just kind of what we did last week, but just very quickly. But also tell us what your Myers-Briggs test result was, if you took the test. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have. So, my name is Siham Abdallah. I'm engineer. I worked for Johnson & Johnson for over 20 years. And I have been a weekend school teacher for many, many years. And I am Tariq Abdallah's wife. And I'm here because I want to learn about communication. Okay?
Thank you, perfect. What were your letters on the test?
Yes, it was INTJ.
INTJ.
J.
Did you feel like it described you well?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
I guess in a way, yeah.
In a way. Okay, good.
Tariq Abdullah. I also a professional engineer. Worked with the society for many years, and I'm here to improve my communication. And I didn't work.
You didn't do
my
the homework?
numbers.
Oh no! Oh no!
I'm sorry.
10 points off. Tell us.
Oops.
He's like me. He's like me.
He's the same thing as you? Okay. That's it. Somehow your wife said you're the same thing then. That's it. We're going to go with that, okay? All right. Sister?
I'm Ilham Abdullah. I'm Tark's sister. I live in Saudi Arabia. Before I'm an English teacher. I'm not working now. That's all.
And they dragged you to the class, which we appreciate. We're glad you're here. Thank you for coming. All right, we have another new person in the back. So,
Assalamu
alaikum salam.
My name is Abdurrahman. I am a freshman in college. I'll just finish my freshman year. I'm in engineering, and inshallah, probably civil, inshallah. And inshallah, it's a blessing to have this class, so inshallah, hope to learn a lot from Ms. Susie, my old high school teacher.
Old?
My
Former. Yes, thank you. That's good. And so we must be careful with the communication words we use, okay? Because they can be misunderstood. All right, so we were talking about the different, the model of communication. The sender, the message, the channel, and the receiver. So anytime we are sending out a message into the world, it's colored by our own experiences. So it's colored by our views, it's colored by where we're coming from. Okay? And where we're coming from in our views, just like the exercise we did with the tree, will affect what it is that we say and how we say it, even if we don't realize it. Okay? So when I said tree, and in my mind it was palm tree, okay, there may have been a certain inflection in the way that I said tree, where in my mind I thought the tree that I was trying to convey to you was a palm tree. So when Ibrahim tells me that he pictured a dead tree in his head, that was not what I was going for, or a pine tree, or an oak tree, or whatever else it was. Okay? Because where I was coming from, my attitude colored my message. Okay? And we do this all the time on a regular basis, especially in the dawah work. I know Sister Siham is very involved with dawah work. And when we do our dawah work, a lot of times when we're trying to speak to someone else about Islam, about our faith, a lot of times we come with the knowledge that they should know certain things. You know, how could they not know certain things? You know, like they should know that Islam is monotheistic. But I can't tell you how many people, even in the process of dawah work, get confused between Hinduism and Islam. And many of them believe that Muslims have multiple gods. And they're often taken aback when they're told that Allah is simply the Arabic word for God, and it's a monotheistic religion. So when we communicate, particularly when we're doing dawah work, it's so important to view our own attitudes and stop and ask ourselves, is what I know exactly what the person across from me knows? Is what I'm saying conveying what I want to convey in a way that they can understand? The message that we're sending, of course, is going to be the code that we talked about in the picture previously, and the channel. How is it being sent? Today, when we cover nonverbal communication, we're going to talk about the hearing, the seeing, the touching, the tasting, the feeling, and things of that sort. And then the receiver. How does the receiver receive the message? Okay? So I want you all to do a little exercise with me. I want you to stand up. I know it's really warm in here, but I don't know. I don't know why the air conditioning isn't working or what's going on. Okay. So I want you all to raise up your right arm. I want you to put your right arm on your shoulder. I want you to raise up your left arm. And I want you to put your left arm on your head. And now I want you to put your right arm on your other shoulder. And your left hand on your other shoulder. And I want you to put your left hand now on your chin.
Your chin?
Okay, how many of you put it on your cheek?
Yeah.
1, 2. Okay, all right. Okay, if you put it on your cheek, stay standing. If you put it on your chin, sit down. Okay, all of you put it on your cheek. Why did you put your hand on your cheek? Because I put it on my cheek, right? Those of you who put it on my chin. On my chin. It's been a long day. Those of you who put it on your chin. Why did you put it on your chin? Because I said chin. All right, so everyone can sit down now. What is the exercise? if you looked around the room, those who put it on the chin weren't really looking at me, right? They were listening, but they weren't really, were you looking?
Technically.
I don't know. I saw some movement back there. I don't know. Those who put it on their cheek were looking at me. Because even though I said chin, my actions spoke louder than my words. Right? And what I did and what you visually saw sent a stronger message than what you heard. So that even though when we're talking about channels, we talk about hearing, seeing, touching, tasting, feeling, when we're in conversation with someone, when we're in communication with someone, most often the strongest element is going to be the visual. So that I might say, I am this and this and that. I feel this and this and that way. Right? But what I show, my nonverbal, is going to have a greater impact than any of my verbal. Right? Because what we see is more often believed than what we hear. And so today we're going to talk about how we can get to that point of making what we feel and what we want to convey across to be actually what the people that we're speaking to hear and understand. So one of the most important things to recognize or to understand is how can we speak the same tongue? How can we speak the same language? I put up a couple of texting languages, texting words up there. BRB, be right back. TGIF, I don't know if anyone says that anymore, but yeah. What is TGIF? See you later, right, with the 8. You know, in one of the conference speeches that I had at ICNA this weekend, it was one of the youth conferences, and I spoke about the topic of youth language. And I had mentioned that, you know, a few years back I had been at ICNA and I had been asked to also speak about youth languages. And I thought I was all cool because I was like LOL and TTYL. And I was like, you know, my 10th grade high school students, I was asking them before I had gone to the lecture, you know, to talk to me about their language. And I realized, like, that's so outdated. Like, you know, no one says LOL anymore, TTYL. It's all about, like, being cray-cray and where's my bae and throwing shade, you know, and a completely different language. And baller, yes, baller status, yes. And so you realize that our level of communication, especially when we're trying to interact with our youth, is changing at such a rapid rate that it's hard for us to keep up with it. You know? And as parents, I think for those of us who are parents in the room, and for those of you who are youth, so that you can get the parent perspective now, we always think that we've got it. Like, you know, like, and as soon as we learn what BRB is, they stop using it. You know? As soon as we learn what TGIF is, it's like it's not a thing anymore, right? And now that I'm a parent, you know, with my own kids, I know my youngest will walk around and be like, OMA. And it took me the longest time to figure out that that was oh my Allah. You know, because she doesn't say OMG, all her little preschool friends say OMA. And I remember thinking, like, you know, in Arabic, I was like, like, you know, speak regular. Why are you speaking like weird, you know? And it reminded me, you know, when I was growing up in the 80s, Michael Jackson was very big at the time. And he had a song that was called Bad. And so everything that was good would be like, bad, that's so bad, like, you know, ooh, that's bad, you know. And I remember my parents going through it and being like, if it's good, why don't you say it's good? Why do you have to call it bad, you know? And we tend to forget that with every generation, there are those changes. And Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu tells us that don't raise your children as you were raised, because every generation faces different problems and different challenges and must be raised in a way that fits their generation. And I think we forget that sometimes as parents. We forget that as children of parents when we can't figure out why we're not connecting.
Who said that?
Sayyidina Ali. I think another really important thing to recognize when we're talking about speaking the same tongue is understanding the language of those around us as well. And it could be that we all speak English, but within the English itself, there are those different modes and mechanisms of speaking. And I'm not talking about accents, I'm not talking about dialects, I'm speaking about the cultural context, that what is understood within the culture, within the community. I'll give you an example. When we look at Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, for instance, when he lived in his town, and he knew that what all the townspeople were doing was wrong, he was completely against the idol worshipping, he was completely against what was happening. And as he sat and reflected, and he asked himself questions, you know, is the sun the God? And when the sun set, he said, this can't be the God. You know, is the moon the God? And then when the moon went away, he said, this can't be the God. And then he came to the understanding of La ilaha illallah. Now, when he wanted to go to the townspeople to tell them that this is not the right way, that they should stop praying to the gods of stone that they were creating and the idols, his own father was the one who was creating the statues, right? He was one of the head statue makers there, and he was also praying to the idols. He didn't go to the townspeople, to his father, and tell them, you're all going to hell, this is it, what you're doing is completely wrong. He spoke to them in a language they could understand. He went into the Kaaba and he broke all of the idols except for the largest one. And he hung the axe on the neck of the largest idol. So when the townspeople came to him and they said, how could this be, how could this happen? Who did this? Why would you do this? He didn't respond and say, I did it. He answered in a language they could understand, and he said, ask the largest idol. Maybe he's the one that did it. And the townspeople responded and said, how can we ask our stone gods? They don't speak. And he said, and yet you take them as your gods. And so he spoke a language they could understand. And of course, Allahu yahdi man yasha, and because of their arrogance and their ego, which we talked about last week, they refused to see the truth. Right? But still, he continued his da'wah in a way they could understand. And sometimes when we're doing da'wah work, when we're speaking to people about Islam, or even when we're speaking within our own families and our own relationships, we don't recognize that we're speaking a different tongue. We think like, why don't you understand what I'm saying? I'm speaking English, aren't I? But we may be speaking English, or we may be speaking Arabic, or we may be speaking Urdu, but we're not speaking it in a way that they can comprehend. So the first step in improving our communication is to learn the language that surrounds us, to learn what reaches people, what makes them connect with others, how can we connect with them as well. And especially this is incredibly important when it comes to our youth as well. How can we connect with our youth on a level that they can understand us, on a way that we know that what we're saying is actually landing, and what they're saying actually lands for us too. And the first step is that recognition that there are many different tongues, even within the same language. The next step is the understanding of the changes in the message, sometimes when it's delivered. Okay? So I want to do another little exercise right now. So we're going to start with Hasna, and I'm going to give Hasna a message. Okay? Hasna is going to read this message and then put the card down, and then from memory, repeat the message to Amira. Then Amira will repeat it to Sister Arifa, and so on until it comes to the end, and then Brother Asad will have to stand in front of the room and tell us what the original message was. Okay? You guys are probably familiar with a similar game that used to play like this. Now I'm just making up the statement now, so hopefully it'll make sense. No, it's not a paragraph, just a sentence. Okay. So go ahead and read it, don't show it to anyone, and then pass the message on. Okay?
So I can't read it as I read it?
No, that's it. Go ahead, pass the message on. I'm going to take the card back now. You can't memorize it, okay? Just go. Let's go, just going to study it. Whisper to her, yep. I don't know why. It didn't take that long to write.
It took a while.
She wrote that. Okay, pass it on to Sister Arifa. It's so hot in here. Yeah, please. Those who walked in, please help yourselves. There's tea here. There's snacks. Please help yourself. There was wasabi. They're really good. They're really good.
Need something or
So good. Well, there's sweet things in there too, like proper sweet ones in there. I know it's better. It's really cute. Did you change it already?
I think I messed up from the beginning.
From the very beginning? Snap? That's it. Okay.
I just like
Don't eat the peas, eat the other thing.
Susie, what did you write down?
I
Like,
wrote
it's-
one sentence. I don't understand what the problem is.
It said quality.
Don't do that. It should have said that.
Wait, can you say that again?
Oh, Hanima's gonna mess it up big time.
That we know.
It's already messed up.
Did it get to Abdurrahman or not yet?
No.
Okay, send it to Abdurrahman.
Why am I gonna
And
butcher it
then,
too?
huh? No, and then you can give it to Muhammad Ali, and then it'll
Oh,
pass
give
to
it
the
to me,
guy.
give it to
Oh,
me.
okay, then you can give it to Brother.
I don't know what she said.
Well, guys, we're not even halfway through yet.
So what's your parts test letters?
I haven't taken it in a while, but I used to have, I know it
That's
was
what I heard.
introverted
So sure that's
Here,
not
I'll
right.
say something.
feeling.
Butcher it? Butcher it.
Hold on, I
No,
have to look
no,
at the
I
thing.
don't know it's your fault.
Do you know like the difference between
Like me.
I know what I got, but I don't know.
Wait,
what
you
the
can't.
alternative
Cheater! Ibrahim's cheating!
No, I'm just hearing.
We got a cheater in our midst?
Alright, we can have a whole lecture on that, okay?
No, that's not right.
Introvert or extrovert?
I don't know, okay?
Could be
We're going
judging or
down to.
perceiving,
I'm on top.
sensing or intuitive, and thinking or feeling.
Oh,
My
you
son
were.
learned a language
What?
he
What?
can understand.
Um,
I didn't
if
hear you.
you
Get
are
out, get out.
intuitive, if you're sensitive, you have finely tuned five senses. Whereas if you're intuitive, you use your sixth sense. So like if you're sensing, it's like you hear, you see, you touch, you feel. Yes. If you're intuitive, it's like without hearing, feeling, touching, you just know certain things.
Is that coffee?
That's tea, but we have Keurig coffee now. No, you can't drink coffee. It's not
Thank you,
good.
thank you.
That's my bedtime,
No,
it's
you can't drink coffee.
8:04, really.
No coffee for you.
Susie.
I think we're at what, 8:15? What time is it?
Yeah, he's real. How we spread rumor.
Alright,
It's gonna be so
so
bad.
then 8:30. Okay, Brother Esther, did you get the message? Okay, let's see.
My son did not get the language.
I didn't say that.
My son, I get the
My son lived into the language but couldn't understand.
couldn't understand
My
the
son
language.
listened to the language but couldn't understand.
Yeah.
That's a great sentence, but it's not even close to what we started with.
Oh, it has to look at
There was nothing about his son.
Nothing was. That's never ruined it again. Oh my god.
I said most.
Okay, that was the original message was a Muslim must learn to speak a language that can be understood if the understander really wants to understand.
Guys, that was a really simple sentence. It was very
Alright.
simple.
A couple of things that happened.
We'll be out.
What did
At
I?
what point did it change into my son?
I think that was my fault.
That was-
I was like, I don't understand.
Susie called it too. What is it?
I knew that's what was going to
Eat it.
happen.
You're nuts.
At some point, why my son, Halima? Why did you think it said my son?
Because I heard the letter
You're
M.
not.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. And then I heard something at the end that sounded like son. I was like, okay, my son.
Okay, so you're just based on the verbal. Did it have anything to do with context? Because I talk about my son all the time, or I mention my son.
I knew you were a kid.
You knew that I had a kid and I had a son. Okay. This is a good example of how our own attitudes will inform and fill in the blanks of things that we don't fully understand sometimes. Okay? So in this situation, and again, this is a little bit exaggerated. I don't think we do this on a work basis, but sometimes it will happen where a message will be sent and somewhere along the way, the message gets completely garbled and you're not sure what happened exactly. In this situation, from a Muslim, it went to my son. Even if you don't realize it externally, Halima, most likely because you have me in class, because you know I have a son, it made sense that the message said my son, right? If you didn't know that, what else would you have possibly put in there?
I also heard mustard.
Mustard. I was thinking, honestly, that's exactly when I was thinking of Halima. I'm like, she's gonna change it to a food or like a song. One of those two, okay? And again, it comes from your worldviews. It comes from your attitudes, from your perspectives. Okay. So the goal is to eliminate that misunderstanding. One way to eliminate it is through articulation, making sure that when we speak, even when we're soft-spoken, that we clearly articulate and we enunciate. Because we live in the Northeast, because many of us are bilingual and trilingual even, we tend to speak very quickly. Okay? And I remember one of my first experiences going out to the Midwest. I was actually invited to speak at the Walmart headquarters in Alabama. time. And I was giving a diversity seminar in the Walmart headquarters in Alabama. And first off, going right in, there were like 10 strikes against me, just from the visual communication, And I could hear the like, does she speak English? Like before I even opened my mouth, right? And then I opened my mouth. And it was early on in my career. I think it was back in like 2010, 2011. It was a while back. And so I was a little nervous. And what happens when we're nervous when we speak?
You don't faster.
We tend to, for Halima, you don't speak. But for others, we tend to accelerate our rate, right? We tend to speed up because we feel like if we just finish fast, then we'll be done, and then we don't have to worry about it, and then it's over, right? And so I did tend to speak a little faster than I normally would speak. And I finished my seminar a lot faster than I was supposed to finish it. And I remember I looked around at the audience at the end, and I'm like, any questions? And like every hand went up. And I'm like, any questions on what I just covered? And like every hand went down. It was more like, and a lot of the feedback that I got afterwards was she spoke too quickly, I couldn't understand what she was saying, because we tend to be very fast-paced as it is. I was never invited back to the Walmart headquarters, but I did learn my lesson. That when I do travel to different areas of the country, I was in Iowa a few weeks ago, I was in Kentucky before that. So when I do travel to Midwestern states, or even just slightly south of New Jersey, I need to slow it down quite a bit. But when I'm speaking in New York, when I'm speaking in Chicago, I usually can speak at my regular rate and it fits in perfectly. So this is a part of understanding our audience and knowing where we're going and how we're communicating and whether or not we can connect with them in the right way. So we talked a little bit about the importance of the nonverbal.
So how to control yourself in that situation?
How do you control yourself? Well, we're going to do some speaking exercises today in class, right after we pray Maghrib, inshallah. But one of it has to do with the breathing techniques. We're so afraid to pause because we feel like if we pause, then people are going to think we don't know what to say next. When in reality, silence is golden. And even, Islamically speaking, the less we talk, the better, But we feel like we need to fill in that blank space with words. And a lot of times we don't have to. A lot of times it's just pausing and not being afraid of that silence, recognizing that the silence is simply going to allow those who are listening to us to stop and listen even closer. Another way of making sure that you control your own rate of speech is through vocal variety. So if I'm speaking to you at this volume the whole time, and I'm continuing to speak in this way, I am probably going to lose your interest because I'm getting a little bit monotone. And for me, it's a little hard to be monotone because I tend to use quite a bit of vocal variety when I speak. But if I were to be monotone, I might say something like, so today's class, we're going to learn about communication. Communication is incredibly important. Stop shaking your head at me, Ibrahim, okay? and I might continue at that. So vocal variety would be, I could speak to you about how important verbal and nonverbal communication is at the same volume. Or I could pause and I could say, verbal communication is important, but nonverbal is even more important. Mind blown. Right? I'm loving this audience in the back here. Their nonverbals are saying,
we have curfew.
You get half extra credit. That's it, okay? Right, you're going to be tested tomorrow. Okay? All right, sorry.
So what we learned in some of the courses and some of the speakers have said, when you're nervous, close your fist tightly and release it. What happens is your heart rate starts controlling, because that's what's happening, the heart rate getting higher and higher, and you can then speak well. So close your fist and open up. If you have something, just hold it and hold tight.
Some people will suggest that you hold something in your hand, but oftentimes when you're holding something in your hand, you wind up playing with it. So if it's a pen, you'll try to keep clicking it, or you'll wind up doing a lot of this with it. When your hands are kept close to your body as you're speaking, you're giving off an impression that you're very close, right? That you're being defensive. A lot of times we'll see a lot of business people also speaking and they put their hands in their pocket, And what impression does this give when they do that?
Arrogant.
Arrogant, exactly, okay? So the idea is to keep an open space. For example, in the center, we do use something called fidgets, which are, excuse me, they're like stress balls almost, but we use them for people who have severe social anxiety. When they go to places and gatherings in large crowds and they feel like their heart rate starts to increase and they begin to sweat and they go through a lot of difficulty, we'll give them the fidgets and tell them to use that. That will often help in social anxiety. In public speaking, we try to wean people away from that and to get people to the point where they can use their hands and allow the nervous energy to escape through their fingers. That's actually a much more effective technique than doing this as you're speaking, right? Because even if you think it's not noticeable, when you're closing, as soon as you tighten your muscles when you're speaking, there will be a physiological reaction in your body, and it will change the tone of your voice, it will change your facial expressions, and it will change the entire construct of your speech. So instead, we encourage people to open up their hands and allow the nervous energy to escape essentially from the fingertips, so that as you're speaking, you feel the tension just leaving your body. Okay? And try it. I mean, it's different methods for different people. And that's why we spent a lot of time last week talking about understanding yourself as a person, because you won't be a strong communicator unless you know who you are as a communicator. Were you going to say something, Brother Asad?
Yeah, in the law, I remember seeing in my law firm, when they're doing the training deposition for the new lawyers.
Yeah.
One of the techniques they use for deposition for pausing, they say pausing is a great technique when you're deporting somebody.
Yeah.
For deposition, you just pause a second and the other person, like, he's obliged to speak out the whole thing, you know. This is a great technique. Just pause and let them speak.
I think we touched upon power distance last week in class. We talked about high power distance and low power distance, right? Oftentimes, if you want to exhibit greater power distance, which means to show that you're in control of the situation, it's about talking less, not about talking more. The more you talk, the more it's like the person who's listening to you speak will often have a more negative view of you and what you're saying than if you speak less. So the idea less is more is incredibly important. And that's hard for you if you're an extrovert, right? For individuals who are extroverts, it becomes very difficult to gauge the whole less is more, because you feel like you need to fill those spaces. Oftentimes extroverts feel like they have to have that constant like da-da-da-da-da-da-da going on, or else they start to question, do they like me? Do they not like me? Are they listening? Are they not listening? And that's the biggest killer of any positive public speaking techniques. When you begin to question what your audience is feeling more than what you're sending out. Okay?
Once we were speaking to teachers in Plainsboro, Swindon, and then we realized we collected feedback after the first was 3 sessions.
Yeah.
After the first session, we looked at the feedback and they said, we wish it was less PowerPoint and more of a conversation. So we said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. So we kind of, a couple of slides and then any questions, anybody this, that. So we figured instead of waiting till the end, have them speak their minds. And that was very well received, because they felt they had to say something in the middle and they felt much better. So.
And it's empowering to the audience too. I think for the audience to feel like they're engaged and interested and connecting with you. And the same goes for when you're having a one-on-one conversation. You know, many of us have those friends probably who monopolize the conversation. You know, it's all about me. You know, and this happened to me today, and that happened to me today. And then in the end, they might be like, oh, and how are you? You know, like after they've gotten through all of that. And again, that's one of the diseases of the nafs that we talked about last week as well. That feeling that you are so important that it trumps everything else. And that's part of the arrogance that we talked about trying to eliminate in our hearts. So always making sure that we have that dialogue with people.
Sorry.
It's okay. I think we're going to break for so long, about 10 minutes or so, 8:30 inshallah. Okay. All right, so let's continue with our discussion of vocal variety that we just touched upon. So the tone of voice. Many times I will hear complaints from people who are non-Muslim speaking about Muslims having a very harsh tone when they speak. You know? What is the tone? Does anyone know what the tone is as opposed to the pitch, the volume, the rate? Like you've heard someone say, oh, he has a sarcastic tone, or he has... The tone is essentially the attitude that is embedded within the language that is being shared. And the attitude that's embedded within the language often comes not from the language itself, but from the nonverbal cues that are affiliated with the language. Okay? So how many of you know someone who just always sounds sarcastic? You know, like everything they say, okay, I was gonna say, I know someone like that. Okay, everything they say, you can't tell whether they're being sincere or whether they're joking or whether they're insulting you for real or, you know people like this, yes? You know people like this.
I know myself.
You know yourself? Okay. Okay. Now what happens? So do people think that you're sarcastic a
A
lot?
lot of time. Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Because I like to spice it up a little bit.
Okay. All right. You like to spice it up. Are there ever times when you're being serious and someone thinks you're sarcastic?
Never.
Never. You're always sarcastic. Okay. I think that was sarcasm right there. Okay. Okay. And that was the perfect example of it. You know, I was expecting the response to my question to be, yes, sometimes it happens, right? To me, that would be an engaging tone, an accepting tone, right? He's like, never. That's a perfect example of a sarcastic tone, okay? It's difficult sometimes when you're labeled by a certain tone. As I mentioned, for many people, they feel like Muslims have a harsh tone. Okay? And sometimes it comes from, you know, in terms of when we talk about gender relations in Islam, for example. And a lot of times when I speak to youth, they run across this difficulty where they feel like, you know, particularly of the marriage age, I'm going to kind of go towards the youth right now, particularly youth of the marriage age. You know. We raise our youth in the masajid, in the MSAs, in different gatherings, and we tell our girls to sit on one side of the room, and we tell our boys to sit on the other side of the room. We tell our girls, you know, don't talk to the brothers, we tell the boys, don't talk to the sisters, right? And then it's time to get married, and then we're like, find yourself a good Muslim husband, or find yourself a good Muslim wife, right? But we've raised them in a way where they feel like they can't talk to the opposite gender if the opposite gender is Muslim. And I see this often when I speak on college campuses where, you know, we'll be sitting in the lecture hall, you know, I've given my lecture, the brothers barely talk to the sisters, you know, Muna walks past Muhammad and Muna might say, Assalamu alaikum, and Muhammad's like, Alaikum assalam, you know? And then as he keeps walking, you know, Jennifer comes along and she's like, hey Mo, how's it going? And I was like, hey Jennifer, how'd you do on the bio test? Okay, not intentionally, you know, and of course, إنما الأعمال بالنيات, actions are but with intention, but by intention. It may not be intentional, but because we raise our youth with this idea of such a huge gender divide, especially within our communities, don't talk to the brothers because what are the parents going to say about you? What's the community going to say about you if they see you talking to the sister? And I'm not encouraging free mixing or let's all hang out and sing kumbaya. Like, that's not what I mean at all. Like, you know, I mean, there are very specific rules of modesty and hayat that we need to live by as Muslims. But I think sometimes we have a double standard in terms of our hayat with our fellow Muslims and with non-Muslims. I see this as people grow older as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think maybe I want to take this thing as a respect. You know? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't want the sister to be doesn't feel uncomfortable, so we just move out, you know. And maybe just when we're meeting some other girl, you know, or woman, we meet like the way they want to meet. You know, so it may be in terms of the respect, not in terms of the, you know, double standard.
But shouldn't we maintain the same level of respect towards anyone of the opposite gender? So if we're trying not to offend a sister, for example, and we want to say Assalamu alaikum modestly looking down, why would we want to have that same reaction with someone who's non-Muslim as well?
I think it does the same thing. I mean, respect. I mean, sometimes I'm not going to say it's going to be, oh yeah. You know, but I personally see, I visit a lot, you know, I travel a lot.
Yeah.
You know, when I here in New Jersey, a lot of people know our custom, Muslim custom. When I go Europe, you know, they, you know, a hug. You know,
hug.
That's they're, and if you're not gonna hug, you're gonna offend it.
Okay.
And then you're gonna say, you know what, this is a Muslim,
okay,
and he's not meeting with the woman, and I don't want to have, you know, I'm gonna have my class about that.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
So this is culture and respect together. It's not a double standard. And sometimes, like me, it came from the Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
Is to adjust a lot of custom in a one time is a lot of pressure.
Okay. Okay. So it's trying to navigate kind of the.
You have to work with it different, you know, and especially when you have an environment where you have a Muslim woman and you have a European woman, American woman, and all. Honestly, I have seen many times. They're coming up, they're hugging, and you're saying, oh. Okay. What I do, I hold things.
That's always a very good technique, yes.
So nobody gonna, you know, hug you or
hold up a hot coffee. Oh. That usually helps.
So we learn this thing, you know. But I would say if the Muslim brother doing like this, I may not gonna treat them as a double standard, maybe in a respect.
It's out of respect. And,
Yeah.
and that's a really good point that you're bringing up, and it is difficult to kind of navigate the cultural standards as we're interacting with people from different backgrounds and different cultures. But I think, I was very affected recently by a talk that I was giving in a company. It was actually New Jersey Gas and Electric. I was giving a diversity seminar, and there was a Hasidic Jewish woman there. And the Hasidic Jewish woman was approached by one of the men, and the man reached out. He was one of the vice presidents. He reached out to shake her hand, and she shook her head and she said, "I don't shake hands. It's against my religion." And the man put his hand down, and I remember thinking like, wow, like she said that with such confidence, and so But I will tell you honestly, I had an experience. When I came out of college, I never really had too much experience of handshaking, not handshaking. And I had my first interview at Johnson & Johnson, actually, which is the first place that I worked out of college. And I remember I walked into the interview, and the man stood up and he had his hand out. And I hadn't really thought about it ahead of time. I'm like, do I shake? Do I not shake? What do I do? And I was like, "Achoo!" And I sneezed into my hand. I'm like, "Oh, you don't want to shake my hand now." And he handed me a tissue, and he's like, "No, it's fine." And he had his hand out. And I remember for a long time after that, I had difficulty trying to navigate, and I kept questioning, am I being a hypocrite? If, I don't shake hands with the Muslim community. I try to avoid shaking hands, but sometimes in the work situation, especially in corporate America, in that moment, you don't have time to explain. Someone sticks their hand out, you take it and you shake. So I struggled with this for a long time until in 2011 I had a book that came out called 9 to 5, Muslims in the Western Workplace. And the first chapter in the book, those who took career planning with me probably know it, the first chapter in the book is called To Shake or Not to Shake. And so I was invited for a television interview on a show called The Natasha Sherman Show. And so I had gone in, the producer came out and he was giving me tips on, how to sit and how the microphone would be positioned and stuff like that. And right before we finished, he stuck his hand out and he said, "Good luck," and his hand was there and I was there and I shook his hand. So I went into the show and Natasha Sherman said, "Hello, how are you?" And she's like, "I have a very interesting question for you." And I said, "Go ahead." And she said, "I read the first chapter of your book. And in it, you talk about how there shouldn't be touching across genders, who are non-mahrams." And, she had read it very well, and it seemed like she did her research. And yet, she said, "I saw you shake the producer's hand right before you came in." And this was on air, on the television show. And I was like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving me a sign. And I have to be honest, after that experience, I have really tried my utmost to educate, And I think sometimes we just assume, remember like when we're going back to that model, we assume that people don't understand or people don't know. And to go back to that Hasidic Jewish woman, when she told the man, "I don't shake," his response was actually, it was a very nice one. He said, "Thank you so much for telling me that. That really gave me a good heads up, and I'll make sure not to extend my hand to any other women of your faith moving forward." And I was like, wow,
Sorry, I'm sharing a lot of my experience.
No, please do.
But it's changed a lot since I have a beard. People already understand.
Okay.
So they don't, handshake or anything. They understand it's a Muslim.
And I think people in current days are a little more hesitant too, and I think it goes back to education. I think we're doing a better job these days of educating and of sharing information about our faith and of being a little more out and proud, as they say, a little more confident in who we are. And I know they don't say it about Muslims. I saw an expression on your face, but we're being a little more confident in who we are. But does it happen sometimes where you're in an awkward position and the hand is out and you shake it? It is. And Allah Alam, I think those are the things that all of us have our own struggles to overcome, our own difficulties that we try to overcome. But when it comes to Salah, for example, one of the diversity seminars I gave was at Goldman Sachs. And I remember, I was speaking at Goldman Sachs and I mentioned that, we pray 5 times a day and Salat al-Jum'ah is required, for men to go. And one of the vice presidents at the end of my talk stood up and said, we have over 300 self-identified Muslim employees here at Goldman Sachs. Not one of them ever told me that they have to pray. And he's like, "Where do you guys pray?" He turned to the audience and said, "Where do you guys pray?" And so a man stood up and he said, "We use the janitor's room on the 5th floor." And so the man is like, "That's why you always smell like Clorox." And while we're sitting there, he said, "I don't know why no one ever told me this. I dedicate conference room C on whatever level to be a prayer room for those who want to pray of all faith." And it was such an easy thing for him to do, that I think sometimes we hesitate to communicate what we need as Muslims. Because we do have minority complex to a certain extent, We do have this feeling that we don't want to stick out as a sore thumb. But I think people are much more receptive, particularly where we live in the Northeast, to understanding and seeking that education. And like I said, when I travel to places like Iowa and Kentucky and Idaho and Indianapolis, there is an interest and there is a true desire to learn. So what we see, happening in terms of hate crimes, of course they exist, but I think the large majority of people around us want to know who we are and what we believe. And I think we have to bring ourselves to that confidence level. Okay? So with that, let's break for Salat al-Maghrib so that we don't go over. We'll pray Maghrib, and then if it's okay, we'll continue. If we could go a little bit over today, maybe till 9:15, to try to wrap things up since we started late. If you have to leave, though, I fully understand. So maybe we could pray in the teacher's room like we did last time. And Abdul Rahman, inshallah, you'll lead us. Brother Tariq.
First day on the job.